Welcome. Okay, I know exactly why you're here. Your PAD 20 paper is due in literally 4 days. Your stress levels are probably completely off the charts, and you're staring down decades of complex Malaysian political history, just wondering how on earth you're going to synthesize the whole shebang. Well, take a deep breath. You're in the right place. In this explainer, we're going to transform all that dense source material into a perfectly structured, highly visual study guide. We'll cut right through the noise, giving you exactly what you need to nail this assignment and actually remember it all. So to build your essay structure, we're chunking 70 years of history into four main eras. We've got the path to independence, the modernization period, uprisings and new politics, and finally, modern political crises. Let's jump right into Chapter 1, the path to independence. This early journey moved incredibly fast. It kicked off in 1948 with the Federation of Malaya, granting limited state-level self-governance. But it wasn't exactly a walk in the park. They immediately faced the Malayan Emergency, which was a severe communist insurgency lasting until 1960. They pushed through, though, negotiating with the British, leading to full independence in 1957. Then, to boost regional stability, they expanded in 1963 to form Malaysia, merging Malaya, Singapore, Sabah, and Sarawak. But just 2 years later, in 1965, political tensions boiled over, and Singapore was expelled to become its own independent city-state. The absolute pinnacle of this era hit on August 31, 1957. With independence officially declared, Tunku Abdul Rahman stepped up as the first prime minister. He established a new government based on the British Westminster system. This basically meant a constitutional monarchy where the king, the YDPA, acted as the head of the nation, while the prime minister ran things as the head of the government.
Now, how did they actually govern such a diverse new nation? Well, if there's one term you absolutely must use in your paper for this section, it's consociationalism. Seriously, write that down. It referred to the social contract formed during the early independence movement. It worked because of deliberate power sharing and cooperation between diverse ethnic groups, specifically led by UMNO, representing the Malays, MCA for the Chinese, and MIC for the Indians. This whole concept, absolute bedrock for early Malaysian society.
All right, moving into Act 2, the modernization period. Pause whatever you're doing and take notes here, because your PAD 270 tutorial literally requires you to discuss 4 distinct modernization programs. Here's your answer on a silver platter. In the 1970s, Malaysia heavily pushed industrialization and the new economic policy. Then, the 1980s shifted into export-oriented growth, riding high on electronics and palm oil. Come the 1990s, they rolled out the incredibly ambitious multimedia super corridor, aiming to turn Kuala Lumpur into a high-tech IT hub. Finally, the 21st century pivots to the knowledge and digital economy, pushing full steam ahead toward Industry 4.0. To really impress your professor, you'll want to highlight the massive economic shift that went down between 1980 and 2004. Agriculture, which historically anchored the entire nation, shrank dramatically, and in its place, manufacturing and financial services exploded. This was Malaysia rapidly transforming from a farming-based economy into a modern industrial and services powerhouse. But that economic growth wasn't just random. It was guided by a very specific political strategy. You literally can't discuss Malaysian modernization without defining the new economic policy, or NEP, launched in 1971. This was a major affirmative action policy designed specifically to fix deep economic imbalances among ethnic groups. By utilizing equity ownership requirements and educational opportunities, its main objective was to restructure society and uplift the Bumiputra communities, which means the Malay and indigenous populations. It's a foundational concept that drove race-based policies in Malaysia for decades. Of course, rapid modernization and deep-seated social policies eventually create some intense friction. That brings us to Act 3, uprisings and new politics. To truly understand these political uprisings, we first have to acknowledge the May 13 incident of 1969. Right after the general elections, severe racial riots erupted between ethnic Malays and Chinese. It was a deeply, deeply scarring moment in the nation's history. The gravity of it was so intense that a national state of emergency was declared, Parliament was completely suspended, and a National Operations Council had to govern until order was restored. In fact, this was the exact catalyst that led to the implementation of the NEP we were just talking about. Fast forward 3 decades, and a brand new kind of friction emerges. You absolutely need to know the concept of new politics. This was a political dogma that started taking shape in 1999. See, for decades, the Barisan National or BN coalition utterly dominated what's now called old politics. But the sacking of Anwar Ibrahim as deputy prime minister in the late 90s, that acted as a massive trigger point. It sparked a fresh era of opposition unity that fundamentally challenged the entire BN status quo.
Let's trace how this new politics dogma actually played out on the streets and at the ballot box. It all started with the Reformasi movement in 1999, protesting corruption and demanding sweeping economic reforms. By 2007, that energy channeled right into the very first Bursik rally, featuring massive street protests demanding clean, fair elections. The pressure just kept building and building until the 2013 general election, where the ruling BN coalition historically lost control of 5 states. Finally, the dam fully broke in May 2018. During the 14th general election, the opposition Pakatan Harapan coalition ended over 60 straight years of Barisan Nasional rule. Just a monumental shift.
Which brings us to our final chapter, and arguably the most chaotic one for anyone trying to keep track. Let's look at modern political crisis. So, the 2020s in Malaysia have been an absolute political roller coaster. You're definitely going to need this rapid-fire timeline to get your facts straight for the paper. As we just saw, May 2018 was the historic moment Pakatan Harapan, or PH, took power. But fast forward to February 2020, and internal disputes caused the PH government to completely collapse. Muhyiddin Yassin then swooped in to form a new coalition called Perikatan Nasional, or PN. Then, boom, the pandemic hits. In January 2021, a COVID-19 state of emergency is declared, which, critics argued was basically just a way to pause parliament and maintain political control. By August 2021, facing a huge loss of parliamentary support, Prime Minister Muhyiddin resigns. This left a giant power vacuum and forced general elections to be delayed all the way until late 2022. When those delayed elections finally happened in November 2022, the results were totally unprecedented. To form a government in Malaysia, a coalition needs a 112-seat majority. Well, PH secured 82, PN got 73, and the formerly dominant BN got only 30. Simply put, no single coalition had the math to rule. For the first time ever, Malaysia was staring down a completely hung parliament in a highly fractured political landscape. So, how did they fix this? The king, the YDPA, had to step in and directly order the establishment of a unity government. This was a massive deal. Bitter former rivals like Pakatan Harapan and Barisan Nasional, along with GPS and GRS, actually combined their seats to form a super coalition of 147 seats. This left Perikatan Nasional to dominate the opposition and hold control over 4 state governments. And that brings us to the absolute perfect way to conclude your paper. The new unity government, led by the 10th Prime Minister, Anwar Ibrahim, introduced the Malaysia Madani policy to strengthen this incredibly delicate new alliance. So your final provocative thought to leave your professor with is this. Can the Malaysia Madani policy truly unify such a complex political history? And can this unity government maintain long-term stability in a fractured landscape still defined by new politics? Think about it. You now have the full timeline, the critical definitions, and the exact structure to ace this assignment. So get studying, take a breath, and go write it. You've got this, for sure.